Welcome back to Black and Orange Sports Buzz, your outlet for university, community, and nationwide sports talk. I'm your host, Olivia Wile, and joining me is a group of sports gurus ready to talk about what's going on in Findlay and beyond. Once again, we have Brady Stabler, Andy Wolf, and Mac Williams. The UF men's soccer team is currently sitting at a 4-10 record, facing Ohio Valley University at home as we speak. Andy, what seems to be going wrong for the Oilers so far this season?
It's certainly not for a lack of talent. I talked to Coach Smith in the preseason on the outlook of this season. Last year they had a winning record. There was a team that they didn't know how good they were going to be. They achieved their potential, posted a winning season. I think they won 10 games last year. You lose 4 seniors off that team. You add more talented freshmen, you have to think, all right, we're going to exceed expectations this year. Some of the conference heads kind of noticed too, they were preseason picked 5th overall, but now they're sitting second to last in the conference standings. They're playing right now. They got 2 more games after that. They need to win probably those 2 games just to even sniff the conference tournament. This is a team that was thinking, we really want to be up there with the conference contenders this year, so it's just a huge contrast in what their season outlook thought it might be.
Yeah, so interesting season for them. Lost a couple games to start the year, then won a couple, then the long losing streak in the middle of the year. It was 6 or 7 in a row, I believe. Just a struggle, and the big thing has been on the road. Haven't been able to win on the road, 2-7 away record.
Yeah, you would think with a veteran team, especially just losing 4 players, that they would be able to go on the road more successfully than they have. Maybe it's just a case of managing expectations so far. Yeah. Going from a season where you had very little expectations to now a season where, hey, we can do some things, and maybe they've fallen a little bit short of that.
They've also probably fallen short of maybe what their offense has been capable of doing. This is a team that was up there nationally. I think they were in the top 3 or 4 in shots per game, goals per game. They're averaging 1 fewer goal per game, which is huge if you think about it from a soccer perspective. They're only averaging about 1.4 goals per game. I also looked, they're averaging 6 fewer shots per game. It's really kind of hard to pin that on anybody. It's probably just a collective team effort, and they also have a new goalkeeper, so defensively that changes things too.
Sure. They knew this 4-game homestand right now that they're in the midst of. I think they're in the 3rd game of 4 right now. They knew that was going to be big. They need to win these next 2, get a little momentum going, maybe squeak into the GMAC tournament and win a couple games.
Right now, I believe they're sitting on the outside looking in, but the good thing for them is they're a couple points out of jumping into the mix. They've got Ohio Valley, as we're speaking. They've got Tiffin and Lake Erie, 3 of the top 5 teams in the league. Right. It's tough sledding. If they pick off one, it could be just the difference of making the conference tournament, and as we know, anything can happen once you get there.
Also, I think it's important to keep into consideration new talent doesn't always mean experience. So we lost those 4 seniors, and although that might not be a huge dent, having new faces not really knowing, the ins and outs of collegiate athletics, it's a whole different game. So, even though there is new talent, the leadership there could be a problem. But I know they've also faced a couple injuries. They have 2 ACL injuries on the team right now, and, hopefully they can turn it around. We'll see. So the UF football team has seen slightly more success than the soccer team, but they're still sitting at a 4-3 record. So what do you guys think that the men need to change to ensure more success in the future? And then how do you think this is going to affect the league championship and the postseason?
Well, they've done a good job overall running the ball. First half stats last week didn't really say that. Only had 14 yards rushing in the first half. But they picked it up in the second half, which shows me that on the road they have the running game to lean on. Mm-hmm. As for the passing game, it's always been there. The key to this team is defense. Defense always has, always will be. So the key to them going forward is how well does that defense play?
Yeah, I think you kind of said it. It sometimes just comes how the schedule falls. I mean, you face maybe 3 of your top opponents of the season in Ferris, Dominican, and Hillsdale within the first 6 weeks. 3-3 might not look so good. They were in the Dominican game. They were in the Hillsdale game. Couldn't get it done. And last year, I think beating Hillsdale was what the difference was, maybe getting them into the playoffs. League championship implication, it's hard because Tiffin, Hillsdale, and Dominican are all up there in the 1-loss and the no-loss teams in the conferences. Finley's sitting at 2 losses in the conference. It's going to be tough to even have a chance at the GMAC.
For sure. I was sitting there a couple weekends ago watching that Hillsdale game. And the defense, just some gaping holes, just missed assignments. getting beat consistently on the outside, it looked like. Some missed tackles. Just the defense really needs to limit those big plays, I think, just tighten up everything. 4-3 record, as we've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 wins, the combined record of the 4 teams they've beaten is 6-18.
Yeah.
So haven't really beaten anybody. I mean, they've beaten everybody they're supposed to beat. Don't have that signature win yet.
I think the Charleston win is a good win on the road. I'm not big on the strength of their conference, even though they were 4-2 going in, but I think they can still cap their season off. They can end up 8-3 and maybe not have much to show for, but Tiffin could be undefeated at that point, and beating an undefeated Tiffin might be something to play for.
Right. And that's their chance for that signature win. I think that's November 10th, the last game of the year at Tiffin.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be a big one.
All right, so from D2 to D1 football, how do you guys think the Ohio State Buckeyes look this season?
Go ahead.
They look good. I think they're looking as good as they're supposed to be. Maybe last week was a little bit more worrisome with the defense. Didn't get a chance to watch the game, but I hear everybody was worried about how the big plays the defense is allowing, a lot of big pass plays to Minnesota, but you only allow 14 points, and they're going to go as Dwayne Haskins takes them.
Yeah, if you look at the Ohio State defense, talented all over the board, but they lead the country in allowing chunk plays of 20 yards or more. They're doing a great job of confining the run, but they're not doing a good job of running the ball themselves on offense, whether that's losing offensive line coach Ed Warner, whether that's just a scheme up front. I don't know what the deal is, but they haven't had the success. Maybe that's because there's a lack of a running quarterback. You don't have a JT Barrett this year.
Richard.
Covers up for a lot of weaknesses. So they need to do a better job of running the football and then stopping those chunk plays on defense.
At the beginning of the year, Ohio State, I didn't really know what to expect. You lose JT Barrett. You don't know, after you lose a guy like that. Haskins obviously is an exceptional talent, maybe the most talented quarterback ever at Ohio State. They're talking big-time arm talent. TCU, I thought would give them a real good test, and they did. Ended up winning the game. Penn State, obviously a big test. We're able to come back and win late in that one. But the more I watch this team, as they progress, it seems to me like maybe there's something missing, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Or someone missing.
It doesn't seem like they have that defensive leader like a Shazier or somebody, or a McMillan in the middle of the defense.
Sure, and the linebackers are a problem. I think part of that might be Greg Schiano's schemes. I've read some stuff. Maybe the NFL schemes that he's brought to Ohio State are a little too complex for Ohio State. A lot of 3 linebacker packages, 2 linebackers playing right up on the line, and it's tough for them to recover and get out and cover running backs and receivers on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, moving to the offensive side of the ball, Dwayne Haskins covers up a lot of problems for that offense. They allowed 3 sacks last week to Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't exactly have the world's best pass rush. They have a decent pass rush, but you get against teams in the East, Michigan State, Michigan at the end of the year, you're going to have to protect Dwayne Haskins a lot more. Again, with the difficulties they're having running the football, Dwayne Haskins, especially throwing for 400 yards a game, covers up a lot of those issues.
I think something with the running game also that could be put into the system. Having trouble running, it seems like the obvious runs, the 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, when they're going to run, that's when they're having trouble getting a lot of yardage. And you mentioned not having a running quarterback. Perhaps Tate Martell in some short yardage situations, I've heard, to put him in there. A dual threat quarterback obviously can keep the defense a little more honest, perhaps.
Yeah, especially, if you don't have a running quarterback, that defensive end doesn't have to respect it. So you can just crash down line of scrimmage and you get stopped for no gain.
Sure.
Yeah. The Buckeyes, too, are in the spotlight this week because, if you guys have heard, Nick Bosa is, going to withdraw from Ohio State because of an injury that actually would put him out until December. So some are saying that, it's totally acceptable, and his net worth right now is $35 million. And standing right now, he's the number 5 draft pick for the NFL. So how do you guys think that this is going to impact the Buckeyes? And do you think he made the right choice?
Well, for the Buckeyes, they've been without him since that TCU game, and I think what you see is what you're going to get from here on out. It's tough to get a lot better from October to November. You can improve a lot from September, but once you get in the middle of the season, it's tough to improve dramatically. And so I think what you're seeing now is what you're going to get. For Nick Bosa, I completely agree with his decision. If you got a chance to go make $35 million, go make $35 million.
Right.
Go do your thing.
Right.
You've been at Ohio State for over a year now. We don't say anything when college basketball players leave after a year.
No, it's a little bit different because we've heard a lot of players Christian McCaffrey was one who skipped a meaningless bowl game. Royce Freeman did it, Derwin James, a lot of guys that are now succeeding in the NFL. This is a little different where you've seen a player that could play, and Ohio State is going to have a meaningful bowl game. You have to believe. You have to think that they control their own destiny for the playoff picture. This is a little different where a lot of people are wondering why Nick Bosa would want to abandon his team. He's received a lot of criticism, but I completely understand why Bosa would want to. He has nothing really left to prove on a college football field.
I agree. I mean, how can you fault a guy that just wants to, not risk anything more and set his family up for many generations to come, with a big contract like that? I think Nick Bosa, more than anything, impacts Ohio State more on the national scene.
Yeah.
That defensive line unit is still very deep. They're still very good. Chase Young off the end, Draymond Jones. They still have guys that they can rotate in there and get a good pass rush. What concerns me is if they face a team, in a national championship perhaps against Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, where if you would have had Nick Bosa and Chase Young both on the ends, now only to have one of them, and with the troubles in the secondary and with the linebackers, I think now losing Nick Bosa makes it very tough for Ohio State to win a national championship.
Yeah, a great defensive line can easily mask the suspect secondary where we've seen Ohio State having to replace Denzel Ward this year. They're, like you said, giving up some chunk plays. Defense can always alleviate that, but they'll figure it out.
For sure.
Yeah, and if you're Nick Bosa, your draft stock's not going to improve that much by playing 2 games at the end of the year,
Right.
possibly 3 in a playoff scenario. So why risk it?
Right.
Sit out.
All he can do is hurt his draft stock.
Yeah.
Those first few games, I thought he was going to win a Heisman maybe. He looked that dominant the first 2 or 3 weeks. He was going to be in that conversation. He doesn't really have anything left to prove.
I think of a guy like Jalen Smith, I believe, for the linebacker for the Cowboys. Bowl game against Ohio State, ironically, he was a Notre Dame linebacker, was a sure first-round talent. Tears his ACL and his LCL in the bowl game, which was probably a meaningless game. It didn't matter to the scouts whether they won that game or not. Tears his ACL, MCL, and now he's one of the leaders on this Dallas defense. He fell to a second-round selection, and if you want to get into the discussion of, well, it cost him X amount of millions of dollars, it's still your future. It's still his chance to make a living.
Oh, yeah.
He lost some money, but he's going to get it back because of his performance.
Right. So jumping back to the Findlay community, how is the Findlay High School football team looking? Are we looking any better than the college team or around even?
Well, Findlay High School has had their ups and downs. I think they're going into the brunt of the track right now. I believe they have Toledo Central Catholic, who is one of the premier programs. They've won 3 state titles in the last 8 years. They may not look very good against Toledo Central Catholic, but nobody really has so far this year. They're down to their backup quarterback. I believe they've still got some tough track games to go, but they took care of business in beating a tricky Lima senior team that has had their number recently.
Yeah, I think Findlay's had about as much success as they're going to have the rest of the way. Toledo Central Catholic, as you mentioned, also have Whitmer on the schedule.
Yeah.
Some big schools. Again, you're playing with some backups, key injuries. I think it's going to be tough sledding for Findlay going here on out. Might be a good time, though, to get some people some experience going into next year.
I agree. Yeah, I looked at the computer rankings today. They're 12th in Region 2, not mathematically eliminated.
Right.
Obviously, Toledo Central Catholic, they always pose a huge challenge. One thing Findlay does have going for them, with Central Catholic and Whitmer coming in, both games at home, that's always a big deal. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but as a guy not that far removed from high school sports, it's a big deal. When you play at home games, you have that steady routine, everything you do on a Friday, and when you go on the road, that sometimes gets thrown off depending on how long the bus trip is or whatever. But it's going to be tough for them. But if they could win both games, they would sneak into the playoff picture.
Yeah, if you're Findlay High School, you're kicking yourself because you got a 1-point loss to Upper Arlington in overtime. You have the loss to Fremont Ross. You have some games in there, total heartbreakers, and this time of the year, you look back on it and you're kicking yourself.
If they would have won 1 or 2 of those games, they could afford to lose to Central Catholic and then play Whitmer, who is ranked 6th in Region 2, and beat them, and you're in probably, or right on the fringe.
Maybe comparing it to the question of any better than Findlay, it was hard to really get a grasp on their preseason outlook for the team. To really get into the playoffs, you either have to beat one of the top teams in the league, a Whitmer or something like that, and few teams have been able to beat Central Catholic in general. UF was a team that was hopeful to be in the playoffs, but if you look at compare the Dominicans and Hillsdales to the Central Catholics, etc., you need to beat somebody good in your league to really stand a chance to get in the playoffs.
Certainly.
All right, well, that will do it for this episode of Black and Orange Sports Buzz. Do you have a topic that you want us to cover on the next episode? Let us know in the comments or tag in our social media at UF Productions. From the UFTV studios, I'm Olivia Wile, and we'll see you next time.